So there's a statement we often encounter either in the comment section or when we're having discussions with people if we're hosting something. And often the statement is, I don't see why I need to plan my affairs. I don't see a need why I need to have a will. I mean, everything that I have, I know who it's going to go to, so there's no necessity for that. Well, as much as this is true to a certain extent, the reason why you draft things such as a will and put your affairs in order is to ensure that underlying issues don't affect those people that are going to inherit from you. So what we're going to do, we're just going to focus on different people. We're going to focus on the single people. We're going to focus on different types of people who are married in different marriages, just so that we can bring to their attention some of the things that could erupt as issues, which are actually the things that should prompt you to take the necessary action. So we're not going to waste time. Let's go into part one. If I'm a single parent, is it a necessity for me to be drafting a will? Because I know that my kids are going to be the ones to benefit from me, right? So is there a necessity for me to be drafting a will? What would I need to be drafting a will for? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make you two practical examples and just show you why it's often a necessity for you to just also write this down. So let's say now you are the mother of 3 kids. 2 kids pass away. And by the time you pass away, now you've got 2 children remaining. But let's say at the time of which you were passing away, already these kids were adults, right? And the one that had predeceased you had kids of his own. And let's say it's a male child. Now, because you passed away and you had 2 children, in most instances, people think it's okay. My 2 kids who are remaining, who are still alive, are going to be the ones to inherit whatever it is that I have, forgetting or probably not being aware of the fact that we also have additional kids that are now going to inherit. Who are those kids? Where do they come from? Well, it's the children of the deceased child that you have. Why would they be inheriting? Well, they are inheriting in the position of their father who passed away. So even though their father passed away prior to you, they still have to inherit on his behalf. So what then happens if you have a property now? This property is going to be inherited not only by your 2 children, but also additionally by your 2 grandchildren. Is that what you intend? Because if it is not, this is why then you should be drafting something. Part 2. So is it a necessity for me, as someone who's married in community of property, to actually be concerned about drafting something such as a will, or be concerned about disposing my 50% when I pass away? I mean, I've got my husband or my spouse and my kids. So is it a necessity for me to be concerned about that? Because they're going to get everything together. Well, let me bring this to your attention. It does happen at times, right? Especially if the value of the things in the joint estate are not much, that everything gets inherited by the surviving spouse and the kids get nothing. And you'd find that the surviving spouse also does the same thing, does not draft a will, does not put their affairs in order, and they end up also marrying additionally in community of property, further combining what they have with a new spouse. And it has been seen so many times where that particular property that now belonged to that initial family now starts belonging to a different type of family, because now there's a blended family. And it does happen at times that those kids, if the second spouse also does the same or in the same manner, that they get nothing out of that. And often the children don't understand how it is that a property can move from their initial family to a new family. Well, it's simply because there were no plans in place. There's nothing such as a will directing what should happen to the 50% that their parents were leaving behind, and as a result, their spouses then ended up inheriting majority or everything that was left behind. Let's go to part 3. And then part 3, is it a necessity for me to be drafting anything as someone who has extramarital kids? I'm married, but I have children outside of wedlock. I'm not married, but I have children outside of wedlock. Very important, because this becomes a bit complicated and complex, and it often confuses everything. 1, If you're single and you've got kids, especially if you're a dad, you've got kids somewhere out there, you would best write something if you want them to benefit or if you don't want them to benefit. It's up to you. And the reason for that is, as soon as you pass away, obviously they have an entitlement. They're going to come forward, right? And so it would be best for you to structure things according to what you want. If you had planned that at least your mother should get something, then maybe it would make sense to make provision for your mother and also your kids, or whatever way in which you want to plan. But you don't want to just leave things as is, because oftentimes there becomes a lot of debacles when you have that type of situation. Either there's not going to be an agreement that those kids outside there that you have must be benefiting, and as a result they're going to struggle to get access to everything you've left behind, and it's going to be worse when you don't even say anything, right? And we've seen certain circumstances where people will go and lie and say that you never had a kid, you never had a child, and if you don't have your affairs in order, who's going to know, right? Also, if you're someone who's married and you've got extramarital kids, is it a necessity for you to be planning anything? Is it necessary for you to be drafting any will? Well, it's necessary. Because in most instances, when you have a family here and a spouse that you're married to here and you've got other kids sitting out there, obviously all of them have to inherit if you don't have a will. But that's not a problem. The problem is that there becomes a competing interest, there becomes a commotion, there is a conflict. People don't have, the same way in which they look at things. No one wants to agree when it comes to that issue. For example, you'll find that you had this family house where you shared it with your current spouse and your kids, and your extramarital kids were living somewhere with their own parents, right? But now you'll find that people are fighting about this exact same house, and you probably never intended for this to be an issue. But now it's an issue because you never said anything. So if you would have drafted that, okay, I need you to get this, you should get this, you'll get this, that way there would have been some form of peace. But now, since you've left things like this, in most instances, do you know what happens? Properties are sold because people are not in agreement. They're like, I also want that property. How are your extramarital children going to live with your current family? Do you think they can do so, in a good way? Often that's not a good idea, right? Because often there's these commotions, like I said, there's conflict. So rather you sort your things out now, because otherwise those things might end up being sold because people are just not in agreement and they are not with the same intent, they're not with the same vision, and so things could end up being a mess.